coordination action team meeting for March. And we have an agenda that is quite full. So let's just go over a little bit of the agenda items. We're going to get an update on our public listening sessions that will be happening later this month. We'll also go over the action plan template. We are progressing towards that final product. So going through the action plan template will be the beginning of how we will start to hone in all this information. We will get an update on the action ideas. There's a green light process with that, so we will talk through those category items. We also have a system for our flood complaints and also emergency planning responses, and we'll go over those ideas and thoughts and have a full discussion on that. We'll finish up our conversation for today with an infrastructure project list discussion. We have lots of ideas and thoughts there where action team members will have to put their thought to it as well. And then we'll have, of course, homework. Next slide, please. So how did we get here? The task force was established by the city administrator in September of 2021. This task force reports to the deputy mayor of operations, which is Dean Law. We have two co-chairs. The CEO of DC Water is Mr. David Gaddis, and the director of DOEE is Tommy Wells. So the meetings were kicked off for the task force in November of 2021. And then we want everyone to know that this is open to the public. All task force and action team meetings are open to the public. We will have public listening sessions for feedback and input from the public. And if you have any questions, you would like to look at any meeting minutes from previous meetings and get updates on upcoming meetings, we have a website, and it is dcfloodtaskforce.org. All one word, dcfloodtaskforce.org. We will have listening sessions for the public that start later this month, and there'll be more information about that to come. Next slide, please. So our flood task force has a regular schedule. The full flood task force meets every other month on the third Wednesday. We have an upcoming meeting on Wednesday, March 16th, next week. We also have action team meetings, which are basically committee meetings. We meet every month. We have the Residential Resilience Committee, and they meet on the second Tuesday of the month, and the Governance and Coordination Committee, which is this one, which meets on the second Friday of every month. The final report is going to be due on November 2022. That's what we're all working towards right now with an action plan for each of the 9 categories that we're discussing and covering. We have a final report that will be completed, and then after that's completed, we will have an annual task force meeting with members to track the progress of the action plan and also to continue with the budget discussions and priorities. Next slide, please. So we do have the 2 action teams that we've already talked about. We have 9 categories. The Residential Resilience action team covers categories 1 through 4, and their next meeting will be on April 12th. The Governance and Coordination Committee covers categories 5 through 9. Next slide, please. So with that, we have our public listening sessions update. Wara from DC Water will share a little bit more about that. Abra?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Monty. So as Monty alluded to, we are scheduled to have or to begin kind of our public listening sessions. And if you all have been following, there has been an immense amount of work that has been put into this task force leading up into this point since our kickoff in November. But since the beginning, the community and making sure that we are not only addressing community concerns and needs when it comes to flooding in the district, but also getting feedback from them about what those concerns are and making sure that we're aligned from a district-wide perspective on goals and after action items that are necessary. As we all know, that climate resilience is one of the district's priorities. And in order to be more resilient, we need to understand kind of where our gaps are and where our gaps are in the communities that we serve. So that is the point of the public listening sessions. This is just the first round. That we will have 2 sessions on the first on March 28th. That one's going to be from 11 a.m. to 12:30. The second will be on March 31st from 6 p.m. to 7:30. And then we also have a third one that will happen, I believe, the first week of April. More on that to come. But again, they're going to be about an hour and a half. We tried to select times where we would be able to catch the diverse needs of the community and the times that they would be able to attend. They will all be held virtually. They will all be recorded, and they will all be also found on our DC Flood Task Force website. But again, the purpose is just to communicate the work that we've done so far as the action ideas, but we also need the public's input to direct kind of how we prioritize those ideas, maybe some ideas that we haven't thought about that are relevant to the community and their needs at this time as well. So we will be asking for not only feedback during the discussion, but feedback thereafter. I would also encourage you all that's a part of this governance committee to actually help us think about ways to elicit the type of conversation that we would want to have in this public setting. If there's anything that you feel that we should be asking, or is there or anything that you all think that we should or you would want to hear from the public as it pertains to flood and flooding, just all matters related to flooding in the district or our infrastructure or the aftermath of flooding, please do let us know so we can make sure that those issues and conversations are brought out during the public listening sessions. And with that, I think I'm passing it back to you, Monty, or possibly Salil.
Thank you, Opera. That was perfect. Again, the public listening sessions are so important. So we do welcome each of the action team members here to please make sure that once the flyer comes out, that you promote it on your own channels and on your own list as soon as they come out. So thank you. So Salil, please, action plan template.
Good morning. Thank you, Monty. And Opera, thank you for that update. I'll go on to the next slide, please. So this is exciting. We're at a point right now we can start documenting some of the discussions we've been having in terms of converting the discussions to action plans. And that's the best way to track them and then have them available for everyone's comments. Can we go to the single slide, or is this the one? All right. Excellent. Thank you very much. So the way this action plan's being organized, and thank you for the input from the folks that took the time to make comments on this, is it starts with identifying the impacted ward or ANC, the agency that'll be leading that particular action plan. That doesn't mean that they are the only sole owners. This is all a joint effort with different agencies, but there has to be a lead person directing it. And then supporting agencies that are contributing towards accomplishing the plan. And of course, there's the all mandatory background that gives people an idea on why we're doing it, what the benefits are, and the explanation, and then the historical context, and how did we get here, what actions were taken in the past, where are we going to go in the future with this. So it gives you an idea on a little more explanation on what that individual action is going to accomplish. Not to leave out, but one of the most important things is talk about equity. And this is a presentation that was made earlier on in the Resilience Committee last week that showed how, with the 100-year floodplain, the 200-year floodplain, there's a majority of the homes that were affected were in Ward 7 and 8. It was this mind-boggling amount. It was over 90%. So equity is a huge piece, especially where flooding is concerned. So we do want to mention that and talk about how this would address those. Next page. With any plan, we need to put a timeline together so that we can track what the estimated completions would be and what would be achieved every subsequent year. Some actions maybe take 1 year to complete, others may take multi-year, but we want to lay those out. Then there's the budget, an estimate of budget, and how would the budget be broken down by phases? Everybody understands that budgeting drives what we can accomplish. There are some actions that can be done with internal budgets and others that need external budgets. So it's good to identify those, especially since, as Monty discussed, we'll be meeting annually to discuss progress. We definitely want to see how the budgets are doing also annually. Last but not least on the action plan would be documenting public outreach and input. Opera just spoke about the public sessions, listening sessions coming up. We do want to get their input in and tie it into each one of these action plans. So there's a direct connection between what we're doing, public's understanding, and their input. And I'm going to jump in before
Yeah,
Meredith
I'll
does.
add in. Yeah,
All right, Meredith, you can talk about when they should be in. Go ahead.
we did send this out to everybody, I think last Friday, for review. So it's open for comment. We would like to get comments back fairly soon. I think I want to put a Tuesday deadline on that. Since it's not too much here, we just want to get it solidified so we can start, filling it in. And one of our real primary goals here was to make this simple. We know we're not bringing in a lot of external support on this. We know it's mostly being done by agency staff, so we wanted to make it just short, direct, to the point. What are the key elements we need to have on this plan, to have everybody take responsibility for their areas, but also have us, note what's needed for each action. So yeah, so that's our goal. That's why we're trying to make it short and to the point. So if you could send back any comments to us by Tuesday, that'd be great. Thanks.
Any more questions around the action plan template? Comments? All right, well, thank you. Adria, if we can switch back to the slide deck, that'd be great. Thanks, Meredith and Salil. Just a little bit of gap in time for the switch. Here we go. So the update on the action plan ideas to Greenlight, that's Meredith Upchurch from DOE. Meredith, please.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna get into the meat of our meeting now. Meeting, excellent. Okay, first off, you should have seen this before. We have we have 9 categories altogether, as Monty mentioned. We have 5 that we cover in this group. And as we've developed our list, we've also been developing criteria on how we evaluate each of the actions, on how much effort it is to make it happen, and then what the benefit and value is. So we're not going to go into detail on these items for everything today. We will later in the meeting talk about infrastructure projects and how we want to evaluate the infrastructure projects. But I'm just putting this up here as a reminder. You're going to see some of these colors on the next pages. So this is what we're using so far to just get a general idea of level of effort and benefit for these actions. So with that, let's go to the next one. We're going to go a little bit out of order in our category numbers, but that's so we can keep our bigger discussions for later. So first, I want to give an update on our regulations, legislation, plans, and permitting item. All of the green light actions are items that we greenlighted last meeting. And just a couple of updates on 6.3, the Flood Resilience Act, that is moving through the council legislation process. So we think that will have a positive outcome in the near term, relative near term. And then I also wanted to just ask for input either now or later on 6.7. This is one that we had talked about a couple of meetings ago. I think we originally had talked about having federal sites included in the flood permitting, but we decided that was not the right thing to do. So now we want to identify where the district federal collaboration is on. And I think this is really targeted towards construction projects. So these would be federal construction projects. How can they fit into the district evaluation process to make sure that there's no adverse impact on any adjacent properties. So the federal projects are not subject to the district regulations on flooding, but we do want to make sure that that everybody's good neighbors here and we don't make any situations worse. So I think I would like to just get a call on who should be involved in that discussion as we move forward with it. I'm guessing NCPC would be on that, other specific federal implementation agencies. Is anybody on who could speak to that? Okay, I'm hearing none.
This is Sandra Knight.
Thank you.
Perhaps there's a National Capital Region FEMA office. So the Homeland Security, FEMA Homeland Security has a National Capital Region office. So that might be someone to involve.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and I know we'll also, I think NPS would want to include NPS on that. And
Exactly.
GSA.
And maybe Corps, but.
Okay, well, we'll follow up with that one after.
Meredith, would reaching out to the architect of the Capitol, because they do some capital projects.
Yeah, that's a good idea as well. Just make sure the note takers are capturing those items, all of those agencies in the notes.
And Meredith, this is Stacy Underwood at the Corps. I'm thinking like the military installations.
Yes.
If you'd have a Navy, Army, or installation rep.
Okay. All great ideas. That's a big group. Okay, well, let's, why don't we move on to the next slide? So on mapping and modeling, just a couple of updates on those items. All of these items were green-lit at the last meeting, so no change there. For the group, we do have a contract now for the integrated flood model. That was finally signed last week. So we are happy that we will be starting that effort very soon, and you'll hear more on that as we get started.
Can you share who the contract is with?
You know, I probably, but I do want to check with my contracting officer before I do that in this public forum. And then also on item 7.3, we did get updated Watts Branch flood maps this week, I think, and so we're going to be working towards getting that LOMAR submitted. But I don't know what the time frame is on that. So, anybody else have any other updates on mapping or modeling?
Meredith, we've been in discussions with the USGS. We have access to their stream gauges. So that's something that's moving forward. So we can talk about how to pull that into the modeling work.
Yeah, that's great. So do you think for this item, do you think that the stream gauges that exist is sufficient, or is there a need for additional?
I think as the modeling progresses, we'll figure out if we need more.
Okay.
And where actually would we need them to be installed?
Okay. Sounds good. I don't have any updates on this one, so I think we can go to category 8.
This is Sandra. Before you switch,
Yeah.
the documenting, create a standard procedure to document floods in affected buildings. USGS is responsible and sets the protocols for high water marks. So it would be, they can do it in partnership with local governments, but you need to make sure you're coordinating with them because they're the official collector and have certain protocols for doing it. So when you're talking to them about gauges, you might talk to them about high water marks, because after floods, a lot of times they get money from FEMA to actually take the high water marks.
That's great. Yeah, I know that 7.7 specifically is based off of a FEMA procedure. And if Victor's on, he can, no, Victor from our flood team is not on today, but that I see. But there's a specific FEMA procedure that that guides this and how it has to be followed. So I'm not sure if that's related to.
Yeah, it probably is, because they partner, they give the money to GS to do some of the work, and then they do some of it themselves. So yes.
This is Martin. There is a procedure for a substantial damage assessment that is important to perform after a flood.
Sandra, you're muted, I think.
I'm sorry. Yes, that is done by FEMA and their team, the substantial damage, but it has to be a presidentially declared disaster. So if it's not, then you're kind of on your own to do that.
And I think that's what we're trying to get to, is something that the district can do, is having a procedure so the district can do that assessment.
Right.
So is the assumption that if you follow a procedure that the data would be accepted?
Right. So USGS has certain protocols for collecting high watermark data and to assure its accuracy and quality. And so those become part of, then they become owners of it in a way and help keep it. So making sure you follow and partner with them is important on that. The substantial damage, if you have flood insurance, that's per building and conducted as a result of flood insurance. Everything else on substantial damage requires a declaration, basically.
Meredith, can I go back to 7.1 and ask a question? You indicated that a contract was awarded. What's the funding situation? Is there enough money to have that contractor do the flood modeling for all DC neighborhoods, or is there still more funding needed? I'm asking because you didn't highlight that in green, and I'm wondering why.
Yes, so there in the original council allocation for that, 5.7 million was allocated for that effort. So that is a substantial amount of funding that does get us very far into the process. We think we can develop the model for that. Like, we think we can probably get at least 80, maybe 75% of the way. But in order to finish everything that we've got in the scope of work for the project right now, which is includes doing analysis for specific neighborhoods and flood resilience designs, or basically flood plans, rough flood concept plans for various neighborhoods. We probably will need a little more, but now that we have a contractor, we can talk about budget more focused and how it will go over the longer term. So we don't need it this fiscal year, next fiscal year, but probably in 3 years.
Meredith, would it be fair to say, to answer Sal's question, that it's so hot off the press we didn't have time to make it green?
Yeah, I think it's just a little preliminary to figure out. Yeah, it was just not something that we could put our thought into right away. At this point, we can probably give it thought within a few months to figure out how we want to actually frame that and when that decision point is. Does that help answer that? Okay, anything else before we move to the next item? Okay, next slide. Alan, do you want to jump in on this one or?
Sure. On 8.1, I mean, I think this one is fairly self-explanatory, and is already underway, which is updating the Silver Jackets MOU to include all participating district agencies as signatories. So this one, just using this flood task force and a moment as an opportunity to revisit, which district agencies can and should be involved in the Silver Jackets. So this one's already underway as an action. And then I think, Salil, I'm passing to you for 8.2 and 3.
Before you do that, Alan, quick question. Could you distinguish in a few sentences what the Silver Jackets do versus what this task force is doing? And assume hypothetically that you're at the public listening session and someone asked that question.
That's a great question. Meredith, is this something I could, I'm newer to the Silver Jackets. Is this something I can ask you to go over?
Yes, and I would also pass it on to Stacy Underwood if possible, or someone else from my team. Stacy, would you be able to give us that?
Sure. Yeah, I was
Thank you.
bringing up my unmuting here. So the DC Silver Jackets team, well, basically, just to give people background, it's a Corps of Engineers program that was developed over 10 years ago, and basically we've established a Silver Jackets, basically an interagency flood risk management team for each state. And so right now, all 50 states and DC and a few of the territories have them. And basically, it's a interagency team where we have federal and district agencies. I think we've had, 20 plus agencies on the DC team. And we just meet routinely throughout the year. We have quarterly meetings. And basically, we collaborate and coordinate to reduce flood risk. We do some projects together because the Corps has some funding for interagency projects. But we mostly, coordinate about our programs. We leverage our resources and so forth to try to reduce flood risk in DC. So this is continuous. We've been doing it for 10 years. We will continue to do it. I don't want to really speak to this task force. This seems like a more focused, with actions. But that's the background of the DC Silver Jackets.
Okay,
Any further questions on that?
Well, I mean, that doesn't really answer my question. Again, the difference. So if we're updating the MOU, for example, what changes from the previous MOU?
So I think one main difference. So number one, the previous MOU had only specific district agencies that were included at that time. And since then, I think since then DEMOA has been created, and there are a few other agencies that are more directly involved with flood work. So part of the MOU update is just going to be including agencies that were not originally included and should be included now. And I think to partly answer your question as well, this flood task force is time limited and kind of with a specific purpose on developing a very specific action plan, and is kind of a joint partnership between DC Water and DOEE under the umbrella of DEMOA. Silver Jackets is broader. It includes a lot more, outside of district government and DC Water agencies, and is not kind of limited to this scope of developing the action plan and developing the plan. It's much broader and ongoing.
And I will add that the DC Silver Jackets doesn't have authority, to tell DC what to do. I mean, we collaborate. It's FEMA, USGS, National Park Service, EPA. We coordinate on on issues, but it's really up to DC, I think, to implement them. And I think that's more of what this task force is doing.
And the last thing I'll add is Silver Jackets, more than this particular task force, is connected to kind of the national Silver Jacket network. Whereas this task force is very focused right now on, DC government, DC water.
It also ties into the two other 8.2, 8.3, because Silver Jacket does a great work, and it's much, to me, it's a much broader scope. But when you get down into the details, some of the issues like how do you work together with different agencies, that's going to be spelled out in the task force within the district itself. The drainage committee, for example, I know that's something Meredith worked on earlier on, and we talked about making it effective as we go forward. The reason it's not green lighted is we haven't progressed to the discussion on that to the point where we could green light it. The same thing with 8.3. We need to talk about different agencies and their roles, and we haven't got to that point on who's going to take responsibility for different actions.
Salil, now that you bring that one up, specifically on 8.3, documenting district maintenance responsibilities for flood risk infrastructure. I know there are several documents that already exist that say who's responsible for what. The Army Corps, and I think produced by Silver Jackets. I recall it was a 2015 document that has a tremendous amount of detail. We know that there's a question specifically about the P Street levy. Do we know that there are uncertainties in responsibilities for any other structures?
And
that's open to anybody.
So for the for the DC levy system that National Park Service maintains at the core belt, the P Street is the only one. I think that there is some uncertainty. I'm not aware of any others. But I guess I would ask, should this be green lighted? It's just specifically that P Street, just because I know that's been an issue in the past, and I know it will not have to be erected very often, but I do know that there's still some confusion about whose role and responsibility that is. So I don't know if that's something that specifically that P Street that should be green lighted. I mean, I'm thinking it's really hopefully just a few meetings and trying to decide that, but that's specifically just the P Street, not other infrastructure. Over.
Stacy, let me ask a question. I'm asking this out of ignorance and not knowing it. We've got similar structures at Blue Plains to protect our facilities from flooding. And twice a year, we go through and we install them. And we have to check the seals, make sure they're not rotted out, make sure they still fit. So there's maintenance work that has to be done so that during an emergency, they'd be available. Is that something that needs to be done in this one also? That needs to be discussed, or maybe it's already done?
Well, for the P Street, it's basically just a sandbag structure. It's only like 2 or 3 feet high. It's not very high, but I know in the past there's been, questions about, who gets the sandbags, who actually installs it. I think there's a document somewhere that says DPW does, but I think they're questioning that. So it's not a heavy lift, but I think right now there's questions about where's the sandbags, who would actually do it.
Thank you. We do need to bring in cranes to do ours.
Yeah, definitely no cranes needed here, but some labor and some sand.
It looks like Camille from DPW may be wanting to speak.
No.
Oh, okay.
But it's a good point. It's good to just document that and make it available to everybody. So there's if there's a question of the interfaces, it gets discussed.
Okay, so let's make that an offline follow-up to just confirm that that's perhaps the only thing we're trying to clarify responsibility on and see who we can engage to to work through that.
And Meredith, if I can go back to that for a second, if there's a question. Before we went into and installed the flood walls, there were a whole bunch of other options we looked at, which were easier to install, but maybe not permanent, that could be used here. So if that's an issue, that's, or is there different technologies that can be used in lieu of sandbags to make it easier? Something we can discuss. Okay.
That might be included on the infrastructure list as a possibility. We can
Wherever
look
it
at that
fits.
when we get to that slide. I have just one more update, and that's on 8.4 for yearly outreach. We are in the midst of planning the DC Flood Week for end of June. So I think there are several agencies involved in that planning, and it will probably, I know, typically also include silver jackets. So yeah, just be on the lookout for that. Any other questions or comments on this item?
You can go to the next
I
slide.
think we're ready.
All right, so now we have our, thanks a lot, Meredith. That was a great discussion. We have quite a couple of things to kind of follow up on. And I know we'll have more ideas offline as well. So for now, we're going to talk about our system and tracking for flood complaints. That's Salil, and I believe Salil, you want Vermecia to participate in this conversation as well.
And we have the action list slide first here, but if you want to talk about the system first, that's the next slide. We can do that first and go back to this.
Sorry, Salil, I'm sorry, we're waiting for you to lead us on this one.
It would help if I come off unmute, right?
Okay, I couldn't tell. I was like, I wasn't sure. Okay, great.
You figure after 2 years, you figure this out. So the dashboard has been created. It's being tested internally within DC Water, and there is plans to externalize it for different district agencies. But we want to make sure we don't get false alarms on those. So we do need to run it through a couple of incidents to make sure it works correctly. On the 311 system, the calls coming into 311 are also directed towards the dashboard so that it gets counted as incidents. And the goal here is to have visibility into number of calls coming in related to flooding, and then locate them by geographically. We're doing it by ward so that you know if there's a concentration of calls, it quickly triggers action. That something's going on in that area. These calls could be from citizens, could be from 311, it could be from different areas. So that's definitely underway. DOE flood risk viewer. Meredith, do you have somebody in your team?
Yeah, before we move on to that, are you able to share what that real-time dashboard looks like? Or is that a sensitive item at this time?
No, it's not a sensitive item. Why don't we plan on doing it at the next meeting so that we already set up and then we'll put it in part of the presentation.
Okay.
I don't need to switch and pull it up from a different area. But it is definitely worth looking at it. Yeah, good point.
And can you kind of share with us just a little detail on how that works? So if a call comes into the call center, or all of a sudden you get lots of calls in the call center, do those get fed into that dashboard? Is it automatic or manual, or how do you all manage that?
So let me go through. It's a good question. Calls get called incidents, and they get recorded as incidents. Now, you might have 20 people calling on the same incident. For example, if there's a pipe break, you may have 20 people calling and saying, hey, I saw water leaking out of this location. To make it actionable, you create a work order within our maintenance management system. So you could have 20 incidents going to a work order. So the command center folks have to balance that out to see how many calls coming in versus how many different actual issues exist. But the dashboard itself will capture the calls as they come in, because it's the frequency as well as the number of calls, and it's going to be shown as a graph, so you can actually see when they increase the number of calls. The dashboard also has other information on it. For a flood dashboard, it also talks about level in the tunnel. It talks about the pumps online, stormwater pump stations, or pumping stations, sewer pumping stations. All that information is available. Not all of that will be public facing because a lot of that might be in internal consumption. But the map of the city with the different wards delineated and how many calls are coming into each ward in real time, that would be public facing for sure. If a call goes to 311 and they direct it to us, or if the call comes to through our website, it still gets recorded. We also tag whether it came through the website, 311, or a direct call to a command center. It's pretty neat system.
Yeah, it sounds very impressive, and I think everyone will look forward to seeing a demo of it next time.
Took almost a year and a half to develop after the September 10th flooding, but it's still work in progress. I think over time, with people's input, it just gets fine-tuned.
So, so when calls come into 311, or if there's a different system where calls go into HCMA's emergency command center, what happens with those calls?
They get routed to us.
They do, okay.
Or they create a I don't have the exact detail, but it comes into our system eventually, and we capture it there. Our preference is always, if it's a DC water issue, that we get the call directly, so that we minimize the time between the call and action. So we need to make it so that we reduce that time if it comes to 311.
Are there calls that come in that are not a DC water responsibility?
Sometimes. In which case we would call 311 back and let them know after we investigate. We always send somebody out to investigate. The investigation is the first step that occurs. We do not try and understand whether we need to respond or not just on the call basis. There was one on the last call we had earlier in the week about a manhole, for example. So that's something you want to address right away.
Sorry, I might have missed it, but did we state what happens if the call generates from your command center and realize that it needs to be in 311, how that works? And then also, are you transferring those calls through 311? Because a lot of the data that the district, other agency uses, we, through open source, we utilize 311 data to do some kind of analytics. So it's just having that access to that information, even if it's maybe dumped every month into some of the Octo enterprises that are data technology office stores. Was that brought up? I just jumped in, so I apologize if it was.
Let me say you have jumped in at the right time. I know our IT was working on bidirectional information transfer. I don't have that at my fingertips, but it's a good point, and I'll make sure it gets covered so that the data goes back to you also.
Yeah, it's great for planning, future planning efforts if we could see the trends and see why things are decreasing and increasing. And so I definitely think it would be great to have. I just know right now, and we through September 10th, we realized there wasn't a centralized way for residents to do that. But I think all these multiple streams, residents should be able to access them, and that information is then being centralized. So not put the burden on the resident, but on us to be more centralized and standardized.
That's also one of our initiatives there.
Oh,
To
really?
have it,
I
to have
read.
it seamless for the residents. Not
Okay.
only calling, but
I
not have to worry
I should give
about-
you the source. Okay, yeah, it's always about less burden on them. So yeah, and then I know I don't know if you mentioned that they do sometimes call council members. So and that's done through you probably already stated this, and the MOKers, they collect that information, and so that also is another area of coordination too.
we certainly need to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think what's been documented in the past is that there is no central collection tracking system for these complaints. I mean, during major events, they get noticed.
So, Meredith, I do know that our IT will have been in contact with Octo's IT to do that. I just did not know where they stand on that issue and what the status is. But we'll get an update.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I think we were working on that. So I'm glad to hear that the system is coming in place to capture the information from
Unknown caller.
311. Then they direct it to you. I think, like you said, Octo was working. You and DC Water and Octo were working on a system to track the information. I think that's good. I think that's still, like you said, it's still ongoing. Those talks are still ongoing. I think the only thing we need to work on is the promotion side. How are we promoting that to residents? Because right now, like Lisa said, the calls sometimes do go to different places. And how we promote, like I think that's what we want to talk on. How we promote the system to the residents, exactly who they should call first. I know that was what we were working on prior. So.
What are you working with our IT department on that?
And is HCMA working on a centralized flood website?
We are trying to do that in conjunction with DC Water and OUC. So it'd be there'll be one centralized hub. That's still an action I know we need to finish.
Mayor, are you referring to the ready.dc website, or are you referring to the 9.4 of the
I'm not sure. I thought I had heard recently that there is something that's being prepared that may be rolling out in the next few months.
Okay, you're referring to the Ready DC preparedness campaign, the website, and we're having a standalone page for flooding. Your team has been working with us as we pretty much do content generation, outreach to residents. But that's more so a preparedness campaign. It will be a part of, once this product is what you're referring to, the complaints systems, once that is finalized, yes, that will be a place where you can advertise that, but this is separate from what you guys are talking about. This seems like more governance, and we're public facing website. So I know Josh and various members on your team are connected in that.
Right. Okay. So that is going to be a preparedness ahead of time source for information, but you would also have links or instructions on how to report flooding or issues. So
exactly.
Explain how to do that. Okay.
Yes,
great.
yes. So that's the public facing version of, but yeah, right now it's ready.dc.gov, that website, but it would be expanded to have whenever, like for instance, September 10th occur, we're still in that phase of just making sure we understand how we want to capture it. But it's similar to COVID, the pandemic and how information was centralized through coronavirus.dc.gov. It would be something similar, but it'll be under the umbrella of ready.dc.gov, which is already a standing preparedness campaign through our agency in coordination with all of the stakeholders on the call. But this would be just one that we keep as a preparedness campaign. But more to come on that as far as the development and the release of that website. We're not at the point of release because we just need to we're in the, more to come on that.
Yeah, it's just great to have all of these efforts in progress.
Yes, it was captured in our actions before. I think once we did the shuffle, it got shuffled off, but it was in our actions. So I can't remember what version we're on.
Okay. We can look at that. Hey, how about right now I share what DOE is doing. We've got updates coming to the flood risk viewer, which is an existing platform. And Josh Schnitzlein from our DOE flood team has been working on that and can give us a brief update on the updates we're adding to that flood risk viewer.
Great. Thank you, Meredith. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Yes, so we revamped the flood risk viewer back in 2019. We completely overhauled the interface, and it's actually run on a private company. Their name is Visonomy, and they've been working with us for many years. And so way back then, we did the complete overhaul in the interface. And actually, last year during our flood week, I actually did a rundown, kind of like a tutorial for folks, for the public. And so that's actually on the DOE YouTube channel. I go through all the functions of the viewer and all the great work that we did. But through our FEMA CTP grant, we are a cooperating technical partner with FEMA. And through that grant, we were able to secure additional funding for this current year. And they actually have completed the work. We're looking to finalize feedback with them. But some of the things that they're doing that I think are really interesting is in the first go around, they added depth grid layers to the floodplain. So not all of the floodplain is equal. Just because you have a blue mapped area on the viewer, there might be 10 feet of flooding, there might be 2 feet of flooding in different areas. So that was a really exciting thing that we did initially. And then with that, we can also run FEMA's HAZUS software, and we can take the parcels in the building code, and we can look at how much each property is estimated to be worth, and then we can look based on those depth damage functions. If a property in the 100-year floodplain were to get hit by a 100-year flood, how much damage would occur as a result? And so for this year, we're expanding that project further to allow for a polygon-based analysis. So not only can you click on one property to see what that damage would be, you can click on an entire neighborhood now, and it'll automatically be updated. You don't have to put in any property characteristics. It'll give you a number. And so we think this will be very beneficial, not only for future FEMA grants and being able to show FEMA what projected damages would be, but also for emergency management and just for the public as well, for awareness. So that's one of the really interesting projects that we're working on through the viewer. Another for this current year, so currently we do have social media tweets in the viewer. So if anybody does a certain keyword, so say someone were to tweet, flooding in Northwest or inundation, if their tweet is public, we can log it, and it'll show up on our mapper. And you can actually click on the time. It's just kind of a spatial temporal analysis of what the public is saying, and that's just an added way for us to try to capture additional we don't always know when everyone who gets flooded and where. So if people are tweeting about it, it's an additional way for us to capture that. Now, I have run into issues, I just say this is a joke, where people will be like, people are flooding the Capital One Arena, and you're going to have to weed those out. So then the final thing we're doing on that for this year to add more to outreach is we're actually creating a story map. And I know FEMA's had a story mapper for a while. I'm sure some people have seen that. But essentially, we can go through and look at all past floods in the district. We can do a historical analysis of stories where it'll show up on our flood mapper. You can click on it and you can play videos and you can look at photographs and then user accounts. But then also the public is going to be able to submit those to us. So say somebody's, say someone's at the tidal basin and there's sea level or there's like a surge and a bench is flooded, or say somebody's car gets flooded or something like that, and they experience a flood and it's not necessarily captured through like a Houston style flood or through the newspaper. They can submit that to us as a flood story. We can review it, and then they can provide a narrative based on that as well. We have a few questions when they go through that process, including, do you have flood insurance, some education for them as well. So we're really excited about that. I would be very happy to do a tutorial video when that comes out and be able to provide it to the group, similar to how we did last year through Flood Week. But it's just another way for us to try to push out and try to capture what the public is experiencing with flooding. So.
Question, just so I make sure I understand, is the risk viewer just for the floodplain?
So it's one of we actually have quite a bit of layers, and we're actually adding more layers on it. But that is the primary purpose, is for you to look at the 100-year floodplain as well as the 500-year areas protected by levee. You can look at the levee system. But we have over 100 other layers, and we're actually adding 250. And so you can look at social economic data as well. So if you wanted to see,
I'm just interested in flood coverage. So when the modeling is completed, for example, will the viewer cover the whole city?
Yes. So it covers it currently. These add-ons that we're doing, those will all be for the whole city. So.
Yeah, the whole city is mapped now for the coastal and riverine flooding. It's just not mapped for the interior flooding, which is where backups happen from the sewer system.
Yeah, so what I'm asking is, when the modeling is all done, or at some other point, will it cover everything, including, for instance, the area that flooded on September 2020? Northeast DC, outside the floodplain.
Right, and so that's where
we do intend. Yeah, we do intend to make updates. Yes.
Okay.
I think we need to move on. Salil, did you want to talk to any of these other actions in this category?
Salil, you're on mute again.
I wonder if that happens automatically or if I'm doing that. Thank you, Monty. So 9.1, 9.2 are still in development stage. Maybe too early to bring them up here. 9.1, I think there is enough early warning systems we can always build on what we have. It's a matter of communicating with the public how they can access them. So there is a piece that goes there, that's communication piece that we can keep adding on to. 9.2 is probably where a lot of the discussion started. What are the different agencies' roles when there's a flooding in the city? That is a very important discussion. Actually, we haven't started on that yet, but it's something we need to start on. There's always a question as to what DDOT does versus DC Water does versus DPW. It's always good to have that agreed on and documented ahead of time. I see HCMI as a lead agency, but Lisa, do you want to jump in on that one? 9.2?
I think what I believe West is.
Oh, West?
Sorry, I was on mute. 9.2. We doing 9.2?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, I think we're in the process of that, establishing the procedures for which agencies will be responding to flooding. I don't believe Carolyn. Where are we at? I think Carolyn's on as well.
So let's let me do another agencies so we can have a discussion on that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's something we can definitely complete this year.
Yeah, and 9.4 was essentially what we just discussed, so I think we can start to put some things on paper.
That would really help, yes.
So is everybody ready for, I think we need to move on to talking about infrastructure projects. Any last brief words?
Yes, if Salil, if you feel like we have covered this category well enough, or if you have some more talking points to share with it in the next minute or two, that'd be fine. Just want to make sure we don't miss out on the last part of our conversation, which it has a lot of detail.
Right. Real quick, just 9.3. Is anybody from DDOT here? I see their name on a sign against it. Just to get an update.
So HCMA and DOE are also involved.
Yeah, so we are, as I shared at our last meeting, we're working with DDOT to do some site assessments of some of the flood analysis that they had done a year ago at 8 hot priority spots that are kind of connected to some of the infrastructure projects, one being in Palisades. So we're working with that team to do site visits of those locations because we can install these flash warning signs that we're working with the vendor that through an existing purchase request. So that project is underway. We should have more to share once those site visits are concluded at the end of the month. And they will be, we can provide a demo on that once we have those site visits with DDOT's existing contracting vehicle that we're trying to leverage.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amicia.
No problem.
Thanks, Ramesia. Can we go to the next slide, please? Great. So infrastructure project discussion will be led by Alan Pop from DMOA's office. Alan?
Yeah, thank you. Can you go to the next slide? So what we're going to do really quickly, and I know we are an hour plus in here, but this is going to be an interactive part. So I'm going to ask folks to, take a deep breath for the next 15 or so minutes. So what we've done here, and this is obviously a really big category in 5.1, is we've developed a list of capital projects and are starting to try to prioritize them, which I'll discuss in a bit. But what we're going to need to do is over the next few months is basically get an understanding of what funding gap we might be facing. And basically the way we need to do that is, first of all, get an understanding of the projects, the collective rough, funding requirement of the capital projects that we have listed in as much detail as possible, like fiscal year, who's going to be funding, but at least get a high level understanding of, are we the, tens of millions, hundred millions, billions, and then see what funding sources we know of and we have available. And then look at that gap, right, between what are the projects we need to fund and what is the funding we have available. And that'll allow us to start talking about this kind of 5.2, which is around creating a new funding source to pay for design and construction of projects. We can't really have that conversation until we have an understanding of the funding available. So what we need from you, and if you can go to the next slide, what we need from you all is an understanding today of what funding sources you are aware of that we may be missing here. And Meredith has put together this great list of key funding sources that we know we have available to us at the federal level. And And you'll note a lot of these are competitive programs, but they are programs we have available to us. We also know that we are probably missing a lot here. So what we would like to get from you, and I'm thinking particularly of folks in other agencies, DPW, DDOT, folks in other agencies, what funding sources are you aware of that we may be missing here that we want to make sure that we're taking into account? And I'll just note, I think we want to think beyond local funding because that is variable year over year, and we can make the case for it. But grant programs, whether it's formula or competitive, that we may be able to start tapping into that we haven't captured here. Meredith, is there anything you would add to that before I open it up to everybody to start inputting with funding sources that they know of?
I'll just reiterate that this is a very preliminary starting list, narrow focused on what DOE knows about in flood mitigation. We only have one line down for federal highways right now, and I know there are multiple more funding sources there, so we definitely need to get DDOT's input on that. Yeah, so this is a starting list, and we do want to know more.
Yeah. And one thing I'll add as a final note, even if you are not aware of funding sources, please let us know right now that, either I'm not aware of any and you have a great list here, or we probably have more, but I don't know offhand and I can get back to you, just so I know that, you're going to be following up on it. So with that, what are we missing here?
Hey, Alan and Meredith, thanks. This is Brent at DPR, and this is just maybe more of a question, but I know we typically we have worked with HCMA in the past. Is that the same as FEMA in the same sense as they provide the similar funding sources? I'm not. I should know that answer. I don't.
HCMA is our link to FEMA. Almost
Oh,
always.
okay. So
I
we
think
got that. That's covered.
Yeah, DOE has a few of the very small FEMA grants as the floodplain manager. That's the cooperating technical partners and the community assistance program. DOE does get that directly from FEMA, but those are very small amounts.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Else I think comes through HCMA, and Bernicia or others can verify or correct that.
Thanks. I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Yeah, you're correct. Brett, you're referring to the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program. That's the one that you're referring to, that we're able to support DPR's work with the small parks, open spaces.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
As far as this list, yeah, we do have some to add to the list because we have done something similar exercise before. And there are things that are coming up on the pipeline from other federal agencies that I see that you have here. There are a few that are that we just learned through the appropriation that we can put in this slide deck as well.
And Vermecia, what's the easiest way for us to get that from you? Should we just follow up over email?
Yeah, that's fine, unless you want to put it in the chat or.
Actually, Stacey Underwood just put a federal flood-related programs list link in the chat, so that should be put into the minutes as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and Vermecia, if you want to add anything into the chat, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I think probably we already have our online Excel sheet with all of the actions and the infrastructure list. I think we can add this as a tab, so we just start populating it there. So we'll send out that link after the meeting, so everybody has that, and we can just start filling it in.
Thank you, Vermecia. Folks from other agencies, what might we be missing here? This is the point where if you don't know, it would be great to speak up and let us know that you're going to hunt it down within your agency.
I think this means, Alan, that you did such a great job. No, but I'm sure that there's more. So if you have some ideas, some thoughts, if we move past this slide, you can put in the chat. Great. I see Stacy has written, Georgetown Climate Center also developed a list of federal and district programs as a part of the Watts-Brants report. It's an appendix, so we can capture that information as well. Thank you, Stacy.
Yeah, Stacy, thank you. You're the MVP of this this portion here.
No problem. This is what we do. We try to leverage all these different resources. So those two resources should be helpful.
Great.
Yeah, I think that the point of collaboration and really making sure that everybody is putting it on the table now, so that we are using these resources so that we can go after them, make a plan, be competitive, as it's stated here. Some are formula, but there's a lot of competitive, and there'll be some other resources, possibly from IIJA and other things that are coming out at current, at present. So it's really important for us to be organized and ready to do it.
Yeah. Well, then maybe what we can do, because I know we're running short on time, is oh, thank you, Sarah. I saw you drop something in the chat as well. We'll make sure to record that. We can move on from this, and I will include this as a follow-up item in addition to the other homework item I'm about to chat about.
I'm sorry,
so-
Alan.
Yeah.
I just wanted to push in. I'm sorry. Andrew also wanted to just say that DPW is not aware of any federal funding sources for right now, but they'll look into it and get back. So thanks a lot, Andrew, for that.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I didn't hear you say that. Great. So I'll include this in the follow-up. The other homework assignment, and this this is kind of a big one, and I know will probably take some time, but we need to get started on this. So what the funding sources is half the equation. The funding needs is kind of the other half of the equation. And this is the list of infrastructure projects that we currently have right now, along with the lead agency. So what we want to get an understanding of are, very roughly, in kind of large buckets, what is the cost estimate of this type of project. And the goal of this will be not to get, this is going to be $212,000 or something like that. It is going to be in a rough bucket. Will this be kind of like 0 to 1 million, 1 to 3 million, on and on and on, so that we can get an understanding, okay, we have a rough funding need of X dollars to Y dollars. And that will allow us to then get an understanding of, will our existing funding sources even come close to that? And if not, what is the rough size of that gap? So the homework assignment here, and happy to take questions if folks have them right now, is we're going to send out this list, and we'll just be asking you all to give a rough bucket of what the cost estimate for each of these projects is going to be. And when I say each of these projects, the projects that your agency is listed as a lead agency on, just basically give us a rough cost estimate or cost estimate range of what that project will cost. If you have no idea, we'll please let us know, but we'll probably depend on you to talk to the folks who you need to talk to get that rough estimate. And if it is truly unknowable, we can talk about that later. But the goal here is to really get a rough understanding. So we'll send this around afterwards, but the homework here will be to fill in that second to rightmost column on cost estimate or cost estimate range. Any questions from folks before we go to our last few sections?
Yeah, and I'll also add, we started to add more projects to this list at the last meeting, but I think there are likely still more projects that people know about that have a need, that have been identified as a problem. So just add that in. We want to make this as comprehensive a list as possible.
Great. Well, thank you, Meredith. We'll send this around afterwards. Please stay tuned for an email on it, and we'll follow up on any questions or if you have specific projects you want to talk about. And Meredith, I think this is back to you.
Yeah.
Yes. So thanks, Alan. It sounds like we have a lot of homework to kind of get back. The slide presentation will be posted online, and we can also make sure that's sent out to everybody, so that you can get back to Alan and his requests. I'm sorry, Alan. Victor sent a note. The Watch Grants report. He just put it in the chat. The one that Stacy mentioned. He said, "See Appendix G." So we've got that capture. Thank you so much, Victor. And we will move on to the next slide. Great. So for closeout, we are going to have Meredith give us. Yes, Meredith.
We have just a couple minutes more on infrastructure.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I
On
apologize.
this slide, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We wanted to just kind of come back to our evaluation criteria. Because we've got this long list of infrastructure projects, and at some point there will have to be some decisions made on what projects are more important to move forward than other projects. And we want to have some data to help us make those decisions. So we had put this first group of criteria together to help inform, magnitudes of effort and benefit values for all the efforts in this flood task force. And we want to be able to tailor this specifically to infrastructure projects. So I think we started to talk about this at the last action team meeting, and I just want to put it out there that we want to get input on if there are additional factors we should include as we're trying to evaluate these projects, in order to compare them, in order to prioritize them, and or comments on what we've got so far. So I think just to run through these quickly, we've got level of effort, how much level of effort, the time, the cost range. I think we'll probably maybe start putting in the projects into more buckets to differentiate that a little bit more. On the benefit value, there's a scale of benefit. Is it a small benefit to a small number of perhaps property owners or people? Or is it a large benefit to a large number of people, a large number of properties, a large neighborhood, or the entire city? In resilience outcome, there's different ways you can combine this. Is it a minor reduction in flood risk, say taking it out of the 100-year and maybe it's only in the 500-year, or taking it out of the 500-year and making it a little more protected? Is it more protection? Is it fully protected from everything we think up to a certain year's storm? We've agreed that it's hard to say that you've ever fully protected a property or a building, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So, and then lastly, prioritizing vulnerable communities. That's a key part of the task force. So we want to make sure we're looking at that as we're evaluating projects. So any other thoughts to, I guess, just quick comments or things to add into the list?
Just a question. I want to make sure it's something I haven't missed. Is there an overall strategy for this, or a set of strategic priorities? Because one way this kind of prioritization gets done is that the overall strategy serves as a filter for specific projects. And I haven't seen that. I just wondered if I've missed something, or if there's somewhere else I should be looking.
I would reach back to the charge that was given the task force. and it definitely focuses on protecting vulnerable communities. I don't know if it was, I don't recall that it was so specific to get into what your
well, for instance, in the larger resilience plan in the climate section, there is a statement about developing a strategy, but I'm not sure what, if anything, has been done with that. I just want to make sure I'm not missing something.
Salil?
I'm thinking as always, you ask some excellent questions. I believe individual tasks would cover that, not necessarily an overall thing, but it's so diverse and different aspects of this flood task force. But for example, the work that Martin's doing will have a defined strategy on the 100-year and 300-year, 500-year flood. I think it's one of the early ones in the resilience. The backwater valve will have a strategy. So individual elements of this could have a strategy. That's a good idea. I'm not sure that one strategy can cover all the different things that are involved here.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just want to make sure I hadn't missed something. Thanks.
It's a good question. Thank you.
Any other comments to add before we close out?
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you, Meredith. So we're going to go on to the closeout. And we have about 6 minutes left. So I just wanted to make sure that we, of course, got our homework in, but this is actually out of date now, right, Meredith? We have lots more homework assignments from the earlier discussions. So hopefully everyone's taken note of Alan's request to look at the infrastructure list and the funding source and add to that. And if you have resources for links and so forth, please send that as well. And Salil, believe, asked for a couple of things. So hopefully we'll have everyone kind of wrap up after this call with additional homework assignments. But for now, go ahead, Meredith. Sorry to cut into your time.
I think we've covered everything. Just reminder, the action plan template comments by Tuesday. Alan did a really good ask for updating the infrastructure project list. And if you've got number 3, if you have an action plan to greenlight, let's start working on those so we can start pulling that together. And I think there will be lots of follow-up discussions on these topics, one specifically on the drainage committee. So we will follow up after the meeting. And next steps, we've got a task force meeting next week. So we're planning on having each category lead give an update on progress. I think we have a lot of good progress to report on. Public listening sessions are coming up, and a few topic ideas for our next action team meeting, continuing the infrastructure funding discussion, interagency coordinating, and emergency planning response. So we want to keep moving. We have a deadline.
Great. So thank you, Meredith. So we have some upcoming meetings. We talked about that at the top of our time this morning, but I just want to kind of recap with the same thing. We have a meeting with the full task force next week. We will go through all of the things that we've been talking about for the last 2 months to keep that progress going. So be ready for that. We also have a residential resilience and governance committee coming up in April. Both one is April 12th, the other is April 15th. Again, the April 15th meeting for governance and coordination, I'm sorry, will be rescheduled, excuse me, because there is a holiday. So look out for that change of date, and we'll also make sure that it's publicly announced so that the public, if they'd like to join, can be a part of the call as well. We have our listening sessions. These are the dates. We have 2 different time slots, which we had hoped to have, and we have them now. So they will be on Microsoft Teams and not on WebEx. So that's a shift from our normal action team and flood task force meetings. So just look out for that link and calendar click if you're on the action team committees. So listening session 1 is on March 28th. From 11 to 12:30, and then the second listening session is on March 31st from 6 to 7:30. We're really looking forward to having the public speak up. Otherwise, it's just us listening to each other. So we want to hear the public, have their feedback, their input, their concerns, and questions. So hopefully we'll have a good discussion with those 2 sessions. Okay, next slide. So with that, I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we adjourn? All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. It's Friday. I know hopefully you'll get outside a little bit. It's beautiful. So maybe take a walk during lunch, get some fresh air, recharge yourself. And thank you. We'll talk to you guys soon. Everyone, bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you.